The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with a mechanical persistence that matched the ache spreading through my lower back. I'd been on my feet for 11 hours straight, the rubber soles of my discount sneakers long past offering any real support against the cracked linoleum floor. The diner smelled like it always did. Burnt coffee, grease from the fryer, and that peculiar sourness that came from years of spilled liquids seeping into places mops couldn't reach. My name is Maya Anderson, and I was invisible. Not literally, of course, but in every way that mattered. 23 years old, working double shifts at Rosie's Diner on the edge of town, where the streetlights flickered more than they illuminated. I'd perfected the art of blending into backgrounds, of moving through spaces without disturbing the air around me. It was a survival skill I'd learned early. When you grew up poor and black in a neighborhood where opportunities came as rarely as clean water, you learned to take up as little space as possible. Maya, table 7 needs refills. Rosie's voice cut through the kitchen noise, sharp as always. I grabbed the coffee pot, feeling the heat seep through the worn handle. My fingers were calloused from years of this, pouring, serving, cleaning, repeating. The weight of exhaustion sat heavy on my shoulders, a familiar companion that had moved in somewhere around my second job and never bothered to leave. Table 7. I'd been avoiding looking at it directly for the past 20 minutes. The man sitting there had arrived just after the dinner rush began to thin, and something about him had made every survival instinct I possessed stand at attention. He wasn't the usual clientele. No faded work uniform, no tired eyes from factory shifts, no counting change for coffee. He wore a suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months, black and perfectly tailored, the kind of fabric that whispered money with every movement. But it wasn't the suit that made my pulse quicken. It was the stillness around him, the way the air seemed to compress in his vicinity, as if the atmosphere itself recognized something dangerous and pulled back accordingly. 2 men sat in a booth nearby. Not with him, but positioned with clear sightlines to the door, to the windows, to him. They didn't eat. They didn't talk. They just watched. I approached the table, coffee pot in hand, eyes down. Always eyes down. "More coffee, sir?" My voice came out steady despite the tremor I felt starting in my hands. "Please." One word, but it carried weight. His voice was deep, textured with an accent I couldn't quite place. Something European, maybe Italian, smoothed by years in America, but not entirely erased. I poured carefully, watching the dark liquid fill the cup, focusing on not spilling, on being professional, on staying invisible. That's when I saw it. His hand rested on the table, long fingers relaxed, and on his right ring finger sat a gold ring. Not a wedding band. This was larger, more ornate. Even in the diner's harsh lighting, I could see the craftsmanship. A family crest of some kind. Intricate scrollwork surrounding what looked like a lion in a crown. The gold had that particular patina that came from age, from being worn by hands before his. My breath caught. The coffee pot trembled, and a drop splashed onto the saucer. "I'm sorry, sir, The words died in my throat because I knew that ring. Not this exact one, but its twin. I'd seen it every day of my childhood. Watched it catch the light as my mother's hands moved. Cooking, cleaning, holding mine when I was scared. It had been the one beautiful thing she owned. The one piece of her past she'd never explained. Never let me touch. "Where did you get this, Mama?" "It was your grandmother's." "That's all you need to know, baby." But Mama was dead now. 6 months dead. Cancer had eaten through her like acid, leaving me alone in the world with nothing but questions and that ring locked away in a safe deposit box because I couldn't afford to lose the only piece of her I had left. The man at table 7 was looking at me now. I could feel his gaze like a physical touch, heavy and assessing. My skin prickled with awareness. "Is something wrong?" His tone hadn't changed, still calm, controlled, but something underneath suggested he missed nothing. I should have said no, should have apologized again, finished pouring, and walked away. That would have been the smart thing, the safe thing. Instead, I heard myself say, "Sir, my mother has a ring like yours." The words hung in the air between us. I watched his hand still on the table, watched his fingers curl slightly, the knuckles whitening. When I finally forced myself to look at his face, I found him staring at me with an intensity that made my stomach drop. He was handsome in a way that felt dangerous. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair touched with silver at the temples, eyes so dark they appeared black in the diner's lighting. Maybe late 30s, maybe 40. The kind of face that belonged on movie screens or in museums, carved from marble by masters. But there was something predatory in those eyes, something that suggested violence lived just beneath that expensive suit. I corrected myself, my voice barely above a whisper. She had a ring like yours. She passed away. I don't know why I told him that. Don't know what possessed me to share something so personal with a stranger who radiated danger like cologne. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the grief that still sat fresh and raw in my chest 6 months later. Maybe it was just the shock of seeing something so intimately familiar in such an unexpected place. His jaw tightened. What was your mother's name? The question came sharp and fast, cutting through the ambient noise of the diner. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me to lie, to make up a name, to back away from this conversation and whatever precipice I'd just stumbled toward. Catherine Anderson. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, recognition, something darker I couldn't name. The two men in the nearby booth had shifted, their attention now fully on our table, on me. One had his hand inside his jacket. Catherine, he repeated. And the way he said it, with familiarity, with something that might have been pain, made my heart hammer against my ribs. He stood then, and I realized I'd severely underestimated his presence sitting down. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, and the way he moved spoke of controlled power, of someone who knew exactly what his body could do. The scent of him reached me, expensive cologne, cedar, and something darker, leather maybe with an underlying note of cigarette smoke. Come here, he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. It wasn't a request. Sir, I'm working. I can't. Rosie, he called out, not loudly, but with absolute authority. Your waitress is taking a break. I'll compensate you for her time. From behind the counter, Rosie's eyes went wide. She looked at me, at him, at the men in the booth, and whatever she saw made her nod quickly. Sure thing. Maya, honey, take your break. My legs moved before my brain fully processed the decision. I slid into the booth across from him, the vinyl cracking beneath me, and set the coffee pot down with shaking hands. Up close I could see more details, a small scar at his temple, the precisely trimmed facial hair, the way his suit jacket fell open to reveal a flash of what might have been a shoulder holster. Oh God, what had I done? Show me, he said. What? The ring. You said your mother had one like mine. Show me. I don't have it with me, I said quickly. It's in a safe deposit box. I couldn't afford to. I work here, and the neighborhood isn't smart. He nodded slightly, approval in the gesture. Where is this box? First National Bank, on Morrison Street. He pulled out a phone, one of several I could now see in his jacket pocket, and typed something quickly. The screen illuminated his face in cold blue light. Tomorrow, he said, still looking at the phone. You will meet me at the bank, noon. You will bring the ring. I don't even know who you are. His eyes lifted to mine, and I felt the full force of his attention like standing in front of an oncoming train. My name is Domenico Salvatore. He said it like I should recognize it, like the syllables themselves carried weight and history. And if your mother truly had a ring like mine, then we have much to discuss. This ring. He held up his hand, the gold catching the light. There are only 2 in the world. They were made for my grandfather and his brother. The brother disappeared 40 years ago, vanished without a trace, and the ring with him. My mouth went dry. That's impossible. My mother, she wasn't Italian. She didn't have any family. She told me. What did she tell you? His voice had gone soft, almost gentle, but there was steel underneath. Nothing. She told me nothing. The words came out bitter. She said it was my grandmother's ring, and that I should never ask questions about it, that the past was buried and should stay buried. Domenico leaned back in the booth, studying me with those unsettling dark eyes. A long moment passed, filled only with the clatter of dishes from the kitchen and the low murmur of other diners who had no idea they were sitting 20 feet from whatever this was. "Your mother was a wise woman," he finally said. "The past often should stay buried, but sometimes the past refuses to stay dead." He reached into his jacket. I tensed, but he only pulled out a business card, heavy cardstock with embossed lettering. He slid it across the table to me. "Tomorrow, noon. Bring the ring, and bring proof of your mother's identity, birth certificate, death certificate, whatever you have. And Maya." He waited until I met his eyes. "Tell no one about this conversation. No one. Do you understand?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Good." He stood, and immediately the two men from the nearby booth rose as well, moving to flank him. "One more thing. This ring of your mother's, did she ever let you try it on?" "No. She kept it locked away. I only saw it a few times." "When you bring it tomorrow, don't put it on." His expression had gone cold, almost frightening. "Under no circumstances should you wear that ring." "Are we clear?" "Why? What happens if I—" "Are we clear?" he repeated, and there was no warmth in his voice now, only command. "Yes," I whispered, "crystal clear." He nodded once, then turned and walked toward the door. The two men followed, one of them dropping several $100 bills on their booth's table as they passed. Through the diner's front window, I watched them climb into a black SUV with tinted windows. Domenico in the back, one man driving, the other in the passenger seat, hand still inside his jacket. The vehicle pulled away, disappearing into the night traffic, and I sat alone in the booth, staring at the business card in my trembling hands. The card was simple: Domenico Salvatore and a phone number. No company name, no title, no address, just a name and a way to reach him. I looked at the hundreds on the nearby table. 5 of them, casually tossed down for coffee that hadn't cost more than $3. The coffee pot sat cooling in front of me, my reflection distorted in its stainless steel surface. What had my mother been involved in? What secret had she carried to her grave? And why did a man who smelled of danger and dressed like money care about a ring that had belonged to a woman who'd died scrubbing other people's floors? I picked up the business card, feeling the quality of the paper, the weight of it. Tomorrow at noon, I would have answers. Or I would make the biggest mistake of my life. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and somewhere in the kitchen, Rosie dropped a plate. The sound of it shattering seemed impossibly loud in the sudden quiet that surrounded me. My fingers closed around the card, and I knew with absolute certainty that my life had just changed forever. I just didn't know yet if it was for better or worse. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I lay in my studio apartment, if you could even call it that, more like a converted storage room with a hot plate and a bathroom the size of a closet, staring at the water-stained ceiling and watching shadows from passing cars crawl across the plaster. The business card sat on the milk crate I used as a nightstand, its presence somehow filling the entire space despite being just a scrap of heavy paper. Domenico Salvatore. I'd Googled the name on my cracked phone screen the moment I got home. The search results had made my blood run cold. Import-export business, the legitimate websites claimed. Restaurants, real estate, construction companies scattered across 3 states. Philanthropist, benefactor to several children's hospitals and community centers. Photos of him in expensive suits at charity galas, always with that same controlled expression. Always surrounded by men in dark clothing who didn't quite look like regular security. But buried deeper in the search results, hidden in true crime forums and old newspaper archives, were different stories, allegations, rumors, the kind of whispers that never made it to official charges but hung in the air like smoke. The Salvatore family, going back 3 generations. Connections to organized crime. An empire built on foundations the law couldn't quite prove but everyone seemed to know about, and I'd told this man about my mother's ring. I'd agreed to meet him, alone. The rational part of my brain screamed that I should run, pack the few things I owned, get on a bus, disappear into some other city where men in $1,000 suits didn't ask questions about dead women and mysterious rings. But the rest of me, the part that had spent 23 years knowing nothing about where I came from, the part that had watched my mother carry secrets to her grave, That part needed answers more than it needed safety. At 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep. I showered in the tiny bathroom with its perpetually dripping faucet, the hot water running out after 3 minutes like always. I dressed carefully, my only pair of jeans without holes, a clean black shirt, the jacket I'd bought at Goodwill that was almost professional looking if you didn't examine the elbows too closely. I wanted to look presentable, though I wasn't sure why it mattered. The bank didn't open until 9. I had 3 hours to kill, and a decision to make. I pulled the shoebox from under my bed, the one that held everything I had left of my mother. Birth certificate, death certificate, a few photographs, her old employee ID from the hotel where she'd worked as a housekeeper for 15 years. My hands shook as I gathered the documents, sliding them into a manila folder I'd stolen from the diner's office. The safe deposit box key was on a chain around my neck. I'd worn it every day since the funeral, the small piece of metal resting against my heart like a talisman or a burden. I left my apartment at 8:30, taking the bus across town to Morrison Street. The morning commute pressed around me, tired people heading to jobs that would never pay enough, everyone locked in their own survival, their own struggles. Yesterday, I'd been one of them. Today, I felt like I was watching from outside my own life. First National Bank was an old building trying to look modern, all marble floors and uncomfortable chairs. I walked to the safe deposit vault with legs that felt disconnected from my body, showed my ID to the clerk who barely looked at me, and was led into the small private room where I could access my box. The ring sat in the metal box on a bed of tissue paper, exactly where I'd placed it 6 months ago. I'd forgotten how beautiful it was. Gold, heavy and warm when I picked it up, with that same intricate design I'd seen on Domenico's hand. A family crest, a lion rampant, a crown, scrollwork that seemed to tell a story I couldn't read. The inside of the band was engraved with something in Italian, the letters worn smooth with age. My mother's hand had worn this ring. Before I was born, before she'd become Catherine Anderson, single mother and hotel housekeeper, who had she been? What life had she fled? I remembered Domenico's warning, don't put it on. I wrapped the ring carefully in tissue paper and slipped it into my jacket pocket, the weight of it somehow heavier than it should be. By 11:30, I was standing outside the bank, the manila folder clutched in my sweating hands. The morning had turned gray, clouds rolling in with the promise of rain. The air smelled like asphalt and exhaust, the particular perfume of the city. The black SUV appeared at exactly noon. It pulled up to the curb in front of me with the smooth silence of expensive machinery, the tinted windows revealing nothing. For a wild moment, I considered running. My legs tensed, ready to bolt, every prey instinct my ancestors had passed down screaming at me to flee. The back door opened. Domenico sat inside, dressed in another impeccable suit, charcoal gray today, with a black shirt and no tie. He looked like he'd stepped out of a fashion magazine or a nightmare. The interior of the SUV was leather and wood grain, the kind of luxury I'd only seen in movies. "Get in, Maya." His voice was calm, but it wasn't a request. I got in. The door closed behind me with a solid thunk, and immediately I felt the separation from the outside world. The windows were heavily tinted, I could barely see out. The driver didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge my presence. Beside him in the passenger seat sat another man, the bulge of a weapon visible beneath his jacket. "Did you bring it?" Domenico asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. My hand went to my pocket, feeling the shape of the ring through the fabric. "And the documents?" I held up the manila folder. He took it with careful hands, opening it in his lap. I watched his face as he examined my mother's birth certificate, his expression unreadable. His fingers traced the edges of the death certificate, and for just a moment something flickered in his eyes. Pain, perhaps, or regret. "Catherine Marie Anderson," he read aloud. "Born March 15, 1975, in Chicago, Illinois. Died January 8, 2025, in County General Hospital." He looked up at me. "Lung cancer?" "Yes." My throat felt tight. She never smoked a day in her life, but she spent 15 years cleaning hotel rooms with industrial chemicals and no ventilation. The doctors said. I stopped, swallowing hard. "It doesn't matter what they said. She's gone." He was quiet for a long moment, still looking at the papers. No father listed on your birth certificate. She said he was gone before I was born. She said I didn't need to know about him. I'd heard that line so many times growing up, had learned to stop asking. She was protecting you. Domenico closed the folder, setting it aside. Your mother was very good at protecting you, it seems. Until she couldn't anymore. The way he said it made my chest tighten. You knew her, didn't you? You knew my mother. No. He shook his head. I never met Catherine Anderson, but I knew of her. Or rather, I knew of the woman she used to be. I don't understand. The ring, Maya. Show me the ring. My hands trembled as I pulled it from my pocket, unwrapping the tissue paper. The gold caught the dim light inside the SUV, seeming to glow with its own internal fire. I held it out to him, careful not to let it touch my skin, remembering his warning. Domenico took it with a reverence that surprised me. He held it up to the light, examining every detail, his breathing slightly faster. Then he held up his own hand, the twin ring on his finger, and placed them side by side. They were identical. Perfect mirrors of each other. Madonna Santissima, he whispered. And I heard genuine emotion crack through his controlled exterior. After all these years, please, I said, my voice breaking. Please just tell me what this means. Tell me who my mother was. He lowered the rings, his dark eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made me want to look away. But I forced myself to hold his gaze. Your mother's real name was Caterina Salvatore, he said quietly. She was my uncle's wife, and if she had this ring, then my uncle, a man who disappeared 40 years ago, a man everyone assumed was dead, lived long enough to give it to her, long enough to father a child. The world tilted. No, I said automatically. That's impossible. We were poor? Domenico's voice held no judgment, only statement of fact. Living in poverty, working minimum wage jobs, struggling to survive? Yes. I imagine she was. Because she was running, Maya. Running from a life she didn't want, from a family she feared, from a world of violence and blood and secrets. He leaned forward slightly, and I smelled that scent again. Cedar and leather and danger. She was running from us. Us, I repeated numbly. The Salvatore family. My family. I shook my head, pressing back against the leather seat. No, you're wrong. My mother was just a regular person. She worked hard. She went to church. She lied to you. Not cruel, just factual. She had to keep you safe. To keep you away from all of this. He gestured vaguely at the SUV, at himself, at the armed men in the front seat. But she's gone now, and the truth doesn't stay buried forever. Tears stung my eyes. I blinked them back furiously, refusing to cry in front of this stranger who claimed to be family, who knew things about my mother I'd never known. Why? I asked. Why did she run? Why would she leave? All of this. I gestured at the obvious wealth surrounding us. Domenico was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, My uncle, your father. His name was Marco Salvatore. He was my father's younger brother, and he was supposed to marry someone else. A woman from another family, a strategic alliance, but he fell in love with a young woman he met at university, Caterina DeMarco. Your mother. He paused and I saw his jaw tighten. They married in secret. When my grandfather found out, he was displeased. There was a confrontation. Marco took this ring, the ring that should have stayed in the family, and he disappeared, with his new wife. We searched for years. My grandfather died still searching. My father died searching. I thought they were both dead. I thought I was the last Salvatore who carried the blood. His eyes fixed on me with an intensity that felt like being caught in a spotlight. But you're here. You exist. Which means Marco lived, at least long enough to father you. And your mother kept running, kept hiding, even after he was gone. When did he die? I asked, my voice barely audible. I don't know. You tell me. Did your mother ever speak of him? I shook my head. Never. She said he was gone before I was born. That's all. Domenico reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement like you would with a frightened animal. His hand covered mine, warm and solid. I'm sorry you lost her. I'm sorry she felt she had to live that way. In fear, in poverty. She should have been. He stopped, seemed to reconsider his words. She deserved better. I pulled my hand away, suddenly angry. She had better. She had me. She had a life she chose, even if it was hard. She was free. Was she? Domenico asked softly. Or was she always looking over her shoulder, always afraid the past would catch up, always worried that someone would recognize a ring, ask the wrong questions, connect the wrong dots? I wanted to argue, but I remembered. Remembered how my mother never stayed in one apartment longer than 2 years, how she never made friends, never dated, never let anyone get close, how she'd startled at unexpected knocks on the door, how she'd taught me to be invisible, to blend in, to never attract attention. I'd thought it was just poverty, just the survival skills of the poor. But maybe it had been something else entirely. What happens now? I asked. Domenico sat back, and I saw him make some decision behind those dark eyes. Now I take you somewhere safe, somewhere we can talk properly. Because, Maya... He picked up my mother's ring, holding it carefully. You are the last of Marco Salvatore's bloodline. You are family. And in my world, family means everything. I don't want to be part of your world, I said, but even I could hear how weak the protest sounded. Unfortunately, Domenico said, not unkindly, you've been part of it since the moment you were born. You just didn't know it. And now that I know you exist, now that this ring has surfaced after 40 years, he looked at me seriously. Others will know soon, too, others who might not have my restraint. Fear spiked through me, cold and sharp. What does that mean? It means, Maya Anderson, that your life as you knew it ended the moment you recognized this ring. And we need to decide what happens next before someone else decides for you. The SUV began to move, pulling away from the bank, and I realized with a jolt that I hadn't agreed to go anywhere. I hadn't agreed to any of this. Where are we going? I demanded, reaching for the door handle. Locked, Domenico said calmly. For your protection. Let me out, right now. Let me out or I'll... You'll what? He didn't sound angry, just curious. Scream? Fight? Run? And then what, Maya? Go back to your studio apartment? Go back to the diner? Pretend this conversation never happened? He leaned forward, and his voice dropped lower. They'll find you, the other families. The ones who want to know what happened to Marco Salvatore, who want to know if there are other rings, other secrets, other treasures from the old country. They'll come asking questions, and they won't be as patient as I am. My breath came faster, panic rising in my chest like floodwater. I'm taking you to my home, Domenico said, his tone gentling slightly. We'll talk. I'll explain everything, and then you'll decide what you want to do. But I need you safe first. Do you understand? I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. The city slipped past the tinted windows, familiar streets giving way to unfamiliar ones, and I sat trapped in leather and luxury with a man who claimed to be my family, but felt like a beautiful prison made flesh. My mother's ring sat in his palm, catching the light, and I wondered if this was what she'd been running from all along, not poverty, not hardship, but this golden cage dressed up as belonging. The house, if you could call it that, sat behind iron gates that opened silently at our approach. Estate would have been more accurate. Maybe compound. The kind of place that existed in a different universe from my studio apartment with its water-stained ceiling and broken radiator. We drove up a tree-lined driveway that seemed to go on forever, perfectly manicured lawns stretching out on either side. The main building was white stone, 3 stories of old-world elegance transplanted into American soil. Columns, balconies, windows that gleamed in the afternoon light. Other buildings dotted the property. Guest houses, maybe, or staff quarters. I counted at least 4 men positioned at various points, all wearing dark suits, all watching our approach. Welcome home, Domenico said, and the irony in his voice suggested he knew exactly how surreal this must feel to me. The SUV stopped in front of the main entrance. My door was opened by yet another man in a dark suit, younger than the others, with a scar across his eyebrow and eyes that assessed me in a single sweeping glance. He offered his hand to help me out. I ignored it. climbing out on my own. My cheap sneakers suddenly loud against the stone driveway. Domenico emerged from his side with fluid grace, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. This way. I followed because what else could I do? Run to where? We were miles from anything resembling public transportation, and something told me I wouldn't make it past the first guard even if I tried. The interior matched the exterior. Marble floors, high ceilings, artwork that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. But it wasn't cold, wasn't sterile. Someone lived here. I could see it in the fresh flowers on the side table, the worn leather of the chairs in what looked like a study, the photographs in expensive frames lining the hallway, family photographs. I caught glimpses as we walked: weddings, christenings, formal portraits, dark-haired men in suits, beautiful women in elegant dresses, children laughing in gardens, a dynasty captured in silver frames. My family, apparently. Strangers wearing faces that might have echoed in my own features if I looked closely enough. Domenico led me to a room off the main hall. A library, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, a fireplace with a low fire burning despite the mild weather. 2 wingback chairs sat angled toward the fire, a small table between them bearing a crystal decanter and glasses. "Sit," he said, gesturing to one of the chairs. "Please." The please felt like an afterthought, but I sat anyway. The chair embraced me with butter-soft leather, and I had to resist the urge to sink into it, to let its comfort seduce me into forgetting where I was and why. Domenico poured 2 glasses of something amber from the decanter. He offered me one. I shook my head. "It's just whiskey. Not poisoned, if that's what you're worried about." A slight smile touched his lips. "If I wanted you dead, Maya, there are far more efficient methods." That's not comforting. It wasn't meant to be. It was meant to be honest. He took a sip from his glass, then set it down and settled into the chair across from me. "Your mother's ring." He pulled it from his pocket, the gold catching the firelight. He set it on the table between us, next to his whiskey glass. Then he removed his own ring, the twin, and placed it beside the first. 2 rings. 2 halves of a story I'd never known existed. "These were made in Naples in 1952, Domenico began, his voice taking on the quality of a storyteller, of someone passing down history. "My grandfather, Antonio Salvatore, and his brother Giovanni, commissioned them when they came to America. A symbol of brotherhood, of blood, of loyalty. Antonio had this one." He touched his own ring, "and Giovanni had the other. But you said it was your uncle Marco who had my mother's ring." "Yes." Giovanni died young, a rival family, a power struggle, the usual story. His ring passed to his son, Marco, my uncle, your father. I stared at the rings, identical, and yet separate. "You said Marco was supposed to marry someone else." "Angelina Rossetti, daughter of another family, another empire. The marriage would have united territories, ended a feud that had lasted 2 generations. There was a contract, agreements made when both were children. In our world, such things are binding." "That's insane," I said. "You can't just arrange marriages like it's the Middle Ages." Domenico's smile was cold. "Can't we? It's tradition, Maya. It's how empires are built and maintained. Love is a luxury. Power is necessity. My mother and father loved each other." "Yes. And it destroyed them both, didn't it?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, fingers steepled. "Marco refused the arrangement. He married Caterina in secret, a girl from a good Italian family, but one with no connections, no power, no use to us. When my grandfather found out, there was a confrontation. Marco was given a choice: annul the marriage, marry Angelina as planned, or be cast out, disowned, dead to the family. He chose my mother. He chose love over loyalty, over blood, over everything we stand for." Domenico's voice was neutral, but I sensed judgment underneath. He took his ring, the symbol of his birthright, and disappeared. My grandfather put a price on his head. Not to kill him, but to bring him back, to make him see reason. But Marco was clever. He knew how to disappear. I thought of my mother, always moving, always watching, always afraid. They were running. For 40 years, it seems, or at least your mother was. I still don't know when Marco died. I still don't know where he's buried. Domenico picked up his whiskey glass, swirled the liquid. But he had time to father a child, to give his ring to his wife, to create you. The way he said it, to create you, made me sound like a thing, a consequence, rather than a person. What happened to Angelina? I asked. The woman he was supposed to marry? Something dark crossed Domenico's face. She married someone else, a man from the Rossetti family approved. They had children, built their own dynasty. He paused. She died 2 years ago, cancer, ironically, like your mother. We sat in silence for a moment, the fire crackling, the weight of all this history pressing down on my shoulders. Why are you telling me all this? I finally asked. What do you want from me? Domenico set down his glass and leaned back, studying me with those unreadable dark eyes. What do I want? That's an interesting question. 3 days ago, I wanted to expand my territory north, negotiate a treaty with the Castellano family, and figure out who was skimming from my casino operations. Simple problems with simple solutions. And now? Now I have a cousin I didn't know existed, a blood relative. The daughter of the man my grandfather mourned until his dying day, the living proof that Marco Salvatore's line didn't end, that the family continues. He stood, walked to the fireplace, stared into the flames. Now, everything is complicated. I watched his profile, the way the firelight cast shadows across his sharp features. I don't want anything from you. I don't want your money or your family or your world. I just want answers about my mother. You already have those answers. He turned to face me. Your mother was Caterina Salvatore, born Caterina DeMarco. She married for love, ran for survival, and lived in hiding to protect her daughter from a world of violence and blood feuds and ancient obligations. She succeeded, until she died. Now you're here, and the hiding is over. So I just... What? Go back to my life? Pretend this never happened? Domenico laughed, but there was no humor in it. You really think it's that simple, Maya? The moment you showed me that ring, the moment you told me your mother's name, you set events in motion that can't be stopped. I've already had to make calls, arrange security, put out feelers to see if anyone else knows about you yet. Fear spiked through me again, sharp and cold. What do you mean, security? Am I in danger? Potentially. He said it so calmly, like discussing the weather. There are people who would very much like to know what happened to Marco Salvatore. People who held grudges against him, against the family. People who might see you as leverage, or as a loose end that needs tying up. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. Then let me go. Let me disappear like my mother did. I can change my name, move to another city. And how long would that last? Domenico crossed to me in 3 long strides, stopping close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. A year? 5? Until someone notices the resemblance, sees you wearing a ring you shouldn't have, asks the right questions. Your mother had the advantage of starting over before the internet, before facial recognition, before everything was documented and searchable. You don't have that luxury. So what are you saying? That I'm trapped here? That I'm a prisoner? I'm saying your family. His hand came up and I flinched, but he only tucked a strand of my hair behind my ear, the gesture oddly gentle. And family stays where I can protect them. I jerked away from his touch. I'm not your family. I'm a stranger who happens to share some DNA. That doesn't give you the right to what? Keep you alive? His voice hardened. You're right. I could let you walk out of here, let you go back to your studio apartment, your shifts at the diner. And in a week, maybe 2, someone would find you. Maybe they'd just ask questions. Maybe they'd torture you for information I don't think you have. Maybe they'd kill you just to send me a message. He stepped closer again, and this time I held my ground. Or, he continued, his voice dropping lower, you stay here, under my protection, safe, fed, no more double shifts, no more burned coffee and grease stains. No more wondering if you can make rent. You learn about where you came from, who your father was, what your legacy means. And in return, you give me information, anything your mother might have told you, anything that might help me understand what happened 40 years ago. That's it? I just stay here? For now. Until I'm certain no one knows about you yet. Until I can neutralize any threats. His hand lifted again, and this time he let his fingers trail down my cheek, his touch warm against my skin. Is that really so terrible? A beautiful home, safety, family? I wanted to say yes, wanted to tell him that a gilded cage was still a cage, that I'd rather take my chances than become whatever he wanted me to be. But I thought about my apartment, about walking home alone at night through streets where violence was common as rain, about the exhaustion that sat in my bones from years of barely surviving, about being alone in the world with no one who cared if I lived or died. I need time, I said. I need to think. Of course. Domenico's hand dropped away. Take all the time you need, but you'll do it here, where it's safe. Maria. The door opened immediately. Had someone been waiting outside? And a woman in her 50s entered, round-faced and kind-eyed, wearing a simple dress and an apron. Maria will show you to a room, Domenico said. You'll find clothes there, toiletries, everything you need. We'll have dinner at 8. I'll send someone for you. It wasn't a suggestion. I followed Maria out of the library, through hallways that seemed designed to disorient, up a grand staircase to the second floor. She chattered in Italian-accented English about the house, about Mr. Salvatore, about how happy everyone was to have family visiting. I barely heard her. The room she showed me to was larger than my entire apartment. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, piled with pillows and draped in fabric that looked too expensive to touch. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens. An ensuite bathroom with a tub I could swim in. A walk-in closet already filled with clothes in my size. How had they managed that so quickly? You rest now, Maria said, patting my arm with maternal warmth. Dinner at 8. I'll come get you, yes? She left before I could respond. I stood in the center of that beautiful room, surrounded by luxury I'd never imagined, and felt more trapped than I ever had in my tiny apartment with its broken radiator and stained ceiling. Because that apartment had been mine, my choice, my life. This was something else entirely. I walked to the window, looked out at the grounds, at the guards I could see patrolling in the distance, at the high walls and iron gates. My mother had run from this, had chosen poverty and fear over wealth and family. Now I was standing in the place she'd fled, wearing the legacy she'd tried to bury. And I had no idea if I could ever leave. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Somewhere in the house I heard voices, footsteps, the sounds of a life I didn't understand. I thought about Domenico's words. In my world, family means everything. But what did family mean when it came with guards and guns and threats dressed up as protection? I sat on the edge of that impossibly soft bed and finally let myself cry. For my mother, for the truth I'd never known, for the girl I'd been yesterday, who had no idea that recognizing a ring would change everything. The tears didn't last long. I'd learned early that crying solved nothing. I wiped my eyes, stood, and walked to the closet. The clothes were beautiful, designer labels, perfect fits, the kind of things I'd only ever seen on mannequins in store windows I couldn't afford to enter. I chose the simplest dress I could find, dark blue and elegant, and laid it out for dinner. If I was going to be trapped in this golden cage, I'd at least face it with dignity. My mother had taught me that much. Dinner was served in a formal dining room that could have seated 20, but held only 2. Domenico sat at the head of an enormous mahogany table, and I was placed to his right, close enough that the intimacy felt deliberate. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over china so delicate I was afraid to touch it, silverware that was actually silver, wine glasses that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Maria served the first course, some kind of soup with herbs I couldn't identify, rich and complex. I ate mechanically, aware of Domenico's eyes on me, watching every movement. "The dress suits you," he said, breaking the silence. "Blue is your color." I didn't respond. Didn't trust myself to be civil. "You're angry with me." Not a question. "You think I've imprisoned you, haven't you?" I set down my spoon, met his gaze directly. "I didn't agree to come here. I didn't agree to stay. You've made decisions about my life without my consent. To keep you alive." His voice remained calm, infuriatingly so. Would you prefer I'd left you to fend for yourself? Let you walk back into danger? I've been fending for myself my entire life. I don't need. You don't know what you need. He leaned forward slightly, his intensity focusing on me like a laser. You've lived in ignorance, Maya, safe in your poverty, invisible in your anonymity. But that protection is gone now. The moment you recognized this ring, he touched the gold band on his finger. You became visible. You became important. You became mine to protect. I'm not yours. I'm not anyone's. A slight smile curved his lips, dangerous and knowing. Keep telling yourself that. Maria appeared to clear the soup bowls, replacing them with the main course. Some kind of meat and sauce, pasta, vegetables arranged like art. The interruption broke the tension, gave me space to breathe. Tell me about your mother, Domenico said as Maria retreated. What was she like? Not Caterina Salvatore, the runaway wife, but Catherine Anderson, the woman who raised you. I hesitated, not wanting to share something so personal with him. But maybe if he understood who she'd been, he'd understand why I couldn't just accept this life he was offering. She was strong, I finally said. Stronger than anyone I've ever known. She worked 2 jobs most of my childhood. Housekeeping during the day, cleaning offices at night. She made sure I went to school, had clothes that fit, food on the table. She never complained, never showed weakness. I paused, pushing pasta around my plate. She sang while she worked, old Italian songs, though I didn't know they were Italian until I was older. She said her grandmother taught her. Did she teach you? Some. I don't remember most of them now. A lie. I remembered every word, every melody, but they felt too intimate to share with this stranger who claimed kinship. What else? Domenico's voice had softened, genuinely curious. She was careful. Never stayed anywhere too long, never made friends, never let anyone get close. I thought she was just cautious, protective. Now I know she was running. The bitterness crept back into my voice. She died alone in a hospital room because she'd pushed everyone away, including me, in a way. There was so much she never told me, so many lies. Not lies. Domenico interrupted. Protection. Everything she did was to protect you. By keeping me ignorant, by making sure I knew nothing about where I came from, who I was. I set down my fork with more force than necessary. How is that protection? It's just control, keeping me small and scared and dependent. She kept you alive. His voice hardened. Do you know what would have happened if my grandfather had found you as a child? Found out that Marco had a daughter? I waited, not wanting to know but needing to hear it. He would have taken you, raised you in the family, yes, but as a tool, a bargaining chip. You would have been married off to strengthen an alliance, traded like property to serve family interests. Just like Angelina was supposed to marry Marco. Just like a dozen other women in our world have been used to build empires. He paused, his eyes boring into mine. Your mother saved you from that. She gave you freedom, even if it came wrapped in poverty and secrets. I absorbed that, feeling the truth of it settle into my bones. And what do you want to do with me, now that you've found me? Domenico was quiet for a long moment, swirling wine in his glass, watching the deep red liquid catch the light. I haven't decided yet. The honesty was somehow more frightening than a lie would have been. There are complications, he continued. The Rossetti family, for one. Angelina had 3 sons before she died. They're powerful, ambitious, and they've never forgotten that Marco humiliated their mother by choosing someone else. If they learn you exist, they'll what? Come after me? Possibly. Or they'll try to use you as leverage against me. Our families have a treaty now, a peace that's held for 10 years. But peace in our world is always fragile. One wrong move, one perceived insult, and everything falls apart. I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. So I'm a liability. Oh, you're a complication, he corrected, but also an opportunity. What kind of opportunity? His smile was sharp, calculating. That depends on what I decide to do with you. The possessiveness in his tone made my skin prickle. I'm not a chess piece for you to move around. aren't you?" He stood, walked around the table to my side. I tensed as he approached, but he only offered his hand. "Come, I want to show you something." I didn't want to take his hand, didn't want to let him lead me anywhere, but curiosity won over caution, and I let him pull me to my feet. He led me through the house to a different wing, our footsteps echoing on marble floors. Guards were positioned at intervals. I counted 5 between the dining room and wherever we were going. Each one nodded respectfully at Domenico, their eyes barely flickering to me before returning to their vigil. We stopped at a heavy wooden door. Domenico produced a key, unlocked it, and gestured me inside. It was an office, but more than that, a command center. One wall was covered with screens showing security feeds from around the property. Another held maps, photographs pinned in clusters, what looked like organizational charts. A massive desk dominated the center, covered in papers and files and phones. This was where he worked, where he ran his empire. "I want you to understand something," Domenico said, closing the door behind us. "Everything I do, every decision I make is calculated. I don't act on impulse. I don't make mistakes." He walked to the wall of photographs, tapped one, a man in his 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, Antonio Rossetti, head of the Rossetti family, Angelina's younger brother. He moved to another photo. His sons, Marco, Giovanni, and Stefano, all in their 30s, all hungry for power. More photos, more faces. A web of connections I couldn't begin to understand. These people are my allies, my enemies, my business partners, my threats. I know their movements, their weaknesses, their ambitions. I stay 3 steps ahead of everyone because that's how you survive in this world. He turned to face me. "And now you're part of this equation. A variable I didn't anticipate, a piece on the board that could change everything. I don't want to be part of your equation. Too late." He crossed to me, and I backed up until I hit the desk, trapped between solid wood and his solid presence. "You exist, Maya. You're Marco Salvatore's daughter. That means something, whether you want it to or not." "What does it mean?" I asked, hating how my voice shook slightly. His hand came up, fingers trailing along my jaw, tilting my face up to meet his eyes. "It means you're valuable. It means people will want to use you, control you, eliminate you. It means you need protection. Your protection." "Yes." His thumb brushed across my lower lip, and I felt heat pool in my stomach despite my fear, despite my anger. My protection, my resources, my name. In exchange for what? His smile was slow, predatory. "We'll negotiate terms." I pushed against his chest, needing distance, needing air. He let me move him back, but only barely. "I'm not for sale." "Everyone's for sale, Maya. It's just a matter of finding the right price." He stepped back fully then, giving me space. "But I'm a patient man. You'll come to understand that staying here, accepting my protection, is the best option you have, and if I don't, then I'll convince you," said with absolute certainty, as if my capitulation was inevitable. A phone on his desk buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, then picked it up and read whatever message had appeared. His expression darkened. "Problem?" I asked. "Yes." He looked at me, and something in his gaze made my blood run cold. "It seems word of your existence has already leaked. Antonio Rossetti just requested a meeting. He wants to discuss recent developments regarding the Salvatore family line." Fear spiked through me. How? How could he know already? Someone talked. Someone always talks. Domenico's jaw tightened. "I need to handle this carefully. The wrong response could trigger a war." "What are you going to do?" He was quiet for a moment, thinking, calculating. Then, "I'm going to tell him the truth, that Marco Salvatore's daughter has been found, that she's under my protection, and that any move against her is a move against me. That's not going to go well, is it?" "No." He moved to the wall of screens, studying the security feeds. "Antonio will see you as a threat, or an opportunity. Either way, he'll want to meet you. I don't want to meet him. What you want is irrelevant." He said it matter-of-factly, without cruelty. "This is happening whether you're ready or not. The question is how we handle it." He turned back to me, and I saw the wheels turning behind his dark eyes. Saw him fitting me into whatever plan he was forming. "Tomorrow," he said. We'll go to my office downtown. I'll arrange a meeting with Antonio on neutral ground. You'll be introduced as family, under my protection. You'll say very little. Let me do the talking and you'll show no fear. Can you do that? I don't know. You can. He crossed to me again, gripped my shoulders firmly. You're stronger than you know, Maya. Your mother was strong enough to run, to survive, to protect you for 23 years. That strength is in your blood. You just need to find it. His hands were warm through the thin fabric of my dress, his proximity overwhelming. I could smell his cologne, see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes, feel the controlled power radiating from him. I'm afraid, I admitted quietly. Good. Fear will keep you sharp. His hands slid down my arms, squeezed gently, then released. But don't let anyone else see it. In my world, fear is weakness, and weakness gets you killed. He stepped back, adjusted his cufflinks with practiced ease, the businessman sliding back into place over whatever emotion had flickered in his eyes. Maria will bring you breakfast at 7 tomorrow. Wear something professional. There are appropriate clothes in your closet. We leave at 9. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the knob. And Maya, don't try to leave tonight. You won't make it past the gate, and it would only complicate things. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with quiet finality. I stood alone in his office, surrounded by screens and secrets, feeling the walls of my gilded cage close in a little tighter. Through the windows, I could see the grounds lit up with security lights, guards making their rounds, the high walls that separated this world from everything I'd known. My mother had escaped this, had chosen poverty and fear over luxury and control, but she'd had my father to run with, someone who loved her enough to give up everything. I was alone. I walked to the desk, looked at the photographs pinned to the wall. All these faces, all these threats and allies and complications, and now I was part of it, whether I wanted to be or not. My reflection stared back at me from one of the dark screens, a young woman in an expensive dress, looking lost and small in a room designed for power. But underneath the fear, underneath the uncertainty, I felt something else stirring, anger. My mother had run because she had no choice, because the world she'd married into gave her no power, no voice, no options, but I wasn't living in her world anymore. Times had changed. Women had changed. Maybe I couldn't escape this cage. But maybe I didn't have to accept the bars either. I thought about Domenico's words. You're stronger than you know. Maybe it was time to find out if he was right. I left the office, found my way back through the labyrinth of hallways to my room. Maria had turned down the bed, left a silk nightgown laid out, placed fresh flowers on the nightstand. I ignored all of it, went to the window, and looked out at the night. Tomorrow I'd meet the Rossetti family. Tomorrow I'd step fully into this world of power and violence and ancient grudges. Tomorrow I'd find out what I was really made of. But tonight, I let myself grieve. For the simple life I'd lost. For the mother who'd died protecting secrets. For the innocence that had shattered the moment I'd recognized a ring on a stranger's hand. The moon rose over the estate, casting silver light across manicured lawns and armed guards and iron gates. And I stood at the window of my beautiful prison and wondered if I'd ever truly be free again. The black suit Maria laid out for me looked like armor, tailored jacket, pencil skirt, silk blouse the color of cream, heels that added 3 inches to my height and made me feel like I was walking on stilts. But when I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked powerful, polished, like I belonged in Domenico's world. The illusion was almost convincing. Breakfast was served in a smaller dining room, just Domenico and me. He wore navy today, a tie the color of blood, and he ate with the focused efficiency of someone for whom meals were fuel, not pleasure. Nervous? He asked, not looking up from his phone. Terrified. Good. Use it. He set down the phone, finally meeting my eyes. Antonio Rossetti is a predator. He'll look for weakness, for leverage, for any advantage he can exploit. You give him nothing. No emotion, no reaction, no opening. Understand? I nodded, pushing eggs around my plate without eating. There are rules to these meetings, Domenico continued. I speak first. You speak only when directly addressed. You never, under any circumstances, answer questions about your mother, your father, or anything that happened before you came to me. If pressed, you defer to me. Always. What if he asks something I can't avoid answering? Then you lie. Said simply, as if dishonesty was just another tool. But convincingly, these people can smell uncertainty like sharks smell blood. The drive into the city took 40 minutes. I sat in the back of the SUV next to Domenico, watching the landscape change from manicured estates to urban sprawl. He worked on his phone the entire time, typing messages, making calls in rapid Italian, orchestrating whatever needed orchestrating. I felt like a doll being moved into position. The building we pulled up to was downtown, glass and steel, modern and imposing. A sign announced it as professional offices, but the security in the lobby suggested something more. Men in suits watched us enter, nodded respectfully at Domenico, assessed me with eyes that saw too much. We took a private elevator to the top floor. The doors opened onto a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A long table dominated the space, and seated at the far end were 3 men. Antonio Rossetti was immediately recognizable from the photograph I'd seen. Silver hair, distinguished features, expensive suit. But in person, he radiated a cold authority that made Domenico seem almost warm by comparison. His eyes fixed on me the moment the elevator doors opened, and I felt stripped bare under that gaze. The 2 younger men flanking him had to be his sons, both dark-haired, both handsome in a sharp-edged way, both watching me with predatory interest. Domenico. Antonio stood, offering his hand across the table. Thank you for meeting on such short notice. Antonio. Domenico shook his hand, the gesture formal and controlled. May I introduce my cousin, Maya Anderson, Marco Salvatore's daughter. Saying it out loud like that, claiming me, defining me by my father, felt like a collar snapping shut around my neck. Antonio's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Marco Salvatore, a name I haven't heard in many years. We all assumed he was dead. He is dead, Domenico said calmly. Has been for over 20 years, we believe. But he lived long enough to father a child. How unexpected. Antonio's gaze raked over me again, assessing, calculating. Please sit. We sat across from them, Domenico's hand briefly touching the small of my back, in what might have looked like a protective gesture but felt like ownership. The table between us was polished to a mirror shine, reflecting our faces in distorted fragments. Your mother. Antonio addressed me directly, ignoring Domenico's earlier rules. She was Caterina DeMarco? I looked at Domenico, waiting for permission. He gave the slightest nod. Yes, I said, keeping my voice steady, though I knew her as Catherine Anderson. And where is she now? Dead, 6 months ago. My condolences. He didn't sound sorry. Did she speak of your father? Of the family? No. She told me nothing. Nothing? One of the sons, Marco, named after my father, the irony wasn't lost on me, leaned forward. That seems unlikely. Surely she mentioned nothing, I interrupted, meeting his eyes. She kept that part of her life buried. I didn't even know the Salvatore family existed until 3 days ago. Convenient, the other son murmured. Careful, Giovanni. Domenico's voice cut like a blade. You're speaking about my cousin, about family. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Antonio raised a hand, silencing his sons. Of course. No disrespect intended. He turned his attention back to me, and his smile was like a shark's. You must understand, Miss Anderson, that your sudden appearance raises questions. Marco Salvatore disappeared with something that didn't belong to him. A ring, a family heirloom. His betrayal caused significant complications for both our families. I don't have to understand anything, I said, surprising myself with my own boldness. I didn't ask to be born into this world. I didn't ask for any of this. But I'm here. And apparently that's a problem for everyone. Domenico's hand found mine under the table, squeezed in what could have been warning or approval. It's not a problem. Antonio said smoothly. It's simply a matter of clarification. You see, when Marco chose to abandon his obligations, to refuse his arranged marriage to my sister Angelina, he set events in motion that affected many lives. Angelina married another man, had children, built a life. But she never forgot the humiliation of being rejected. That was 40 years ago, Domenico interjected. Ancient history. History has a way of echoing forward. Antonio's eyes never left mine. Tell me, Ms. Anderson, do you have the ring? Your father's ring? The question hung in the air like a blade. That's not your concern, Domenico said. I believe it is. That ring is Salvatore family property. If Marco gave it to his wife, to his daughter, then it should be returned to the family, to you, Domenico, as head of the family. The ring is exactly where it belongs, Domenico said. In my possession. I kept my face neutral, even as I registered the lie. The ring was in my room, locked in the safe Domenico had shown me how to use. He'd given it back to me last night, said it was mine by right of blood. Or had he? Now I wasn't sure. Everything felt like manipulation, like chess moves I couldn't see. Well then. Antonio sat back, satisfied. That simplifies matters. The ring is returned, the family line is acknowledged, and we can all move forward. There is the matter of Maya's protection, Domenico said. As my cousin, she's under my care. Any threat to her is a threat to me. Of course. Antonio's smile didn't reach his eyes. Though, I wonder if she needs such intensive protection. Surely she could live her own life, now that family matters are settled. She stays with me. The possessiveness in Domenico's voice sent a chill through me. This wasn't about protection anymore, if it ever had been. This was about control, about ownership, about me being a piece in whatever game they were all playing. May I speak? I asked, not caring anymore about the rules. Both men looked at me, surprised. I didn't ask for any of this, I repeated, my voice stronger now. I didn't ask to be Marco Salvatore's daughter, or Domenico's cousin, or part of your world. My mother ran from all of this for a reason. Maybe I should follow her example. And go where? Giovanni asked mockingly. Back to your diner? Your studio apartment? Pretend none of this exists? Maybe. I stood, the chair scraping loudly. Maybe that's exactly what I should do. Domenico's hand shot out, gripped my wrist. Sit down, Maya. No. I pulled against his grip, but his fingers were iron. Let go of me. Sit. Down. His voice was quiet, deadly. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand perfectly. I'm a bargaining chip. A piece of property you're all fighting over. Well, I'm not playing anymore. Antonio laughed. Genuine amusement in the sound. She has spirit. I like that. She has my protection, Domenico said, still gripping my wrist. She goes nowhere. Something in me snapped. All the fear, all the uncertainty, all the grief and anger I'd been swallowing for days. It erupted. I yanked my wrist free with strength I didn't know I had, stepped back from the table. You don't own me. Neither of you do. I'm leaving. I turned toward the elevator. The doors were blocked by 2 guards, positioned there so quietly I hadn't noticed. Of course they were. I'd walked into a cage and hadn't even seen the bars close. Let her go, Antonio said, surprising everyone. If she wants to leave, let her try. Domenico stood slowly, and the danger radiating from him was palpable. Antonio, I'm curious, the older man continued, to see how far she gets, how long she survives without protection, without resources, without understanding the target you've painted on her back by acknowledging her publicly. The words hit like ice water. He was right. I had nowhere to go, no money beyond the few $100s in my actual apartment, if I could even get there, and now everyone in this world knew I existed. Domenico had made sure of that. My knees went weak, but I refused to show it, refused to give them the satisfaction. You're a bastard, I said to Domenico. Both of you are. Yes, he agreed calmly. But I'm the bastard keeping you alive. Now sit down, and let's finish this meeting like rational adults. I wanted to refuse, Wanted to fight my way past the guards, run down 20 floors, disappear into the city, but Antonio's words echoed in my head. How long she survives. I sat. The triumph in Domenico's eyes was subtle but unmistakable. Smart girl, Antonio said. You learn quickly. Go to hell, I muttered. He laughed again. I like her, Domenico. She has fire. Reminds me of Angelina at that age. The comparison made my skin crawl. We're done here, Domenico said, standing. The family line is acknowledged, Maya is under my protection, and the ring is secured. Unless you have other business. Just one thing. Antonio stood as well, buttoning his suit jacket. A suggestion, really. This situation, Marco's daughter suddenly appearing, it creates opportunities. Opportunities that benefit both our families. What kind of opportunities? Domenico's voice was carefully neutral. A marriage, perhaps. A union that could finally heal the rift Marco created. My youngest son, Stefano. He gestured to a young man I hadn't noticed before, standing by the windows. He's unmarried, ambitious, and quite taken with your cousin. I looked at the man by the window, late 20s, handsome in a cold way, watching me with calculating eyes. No, I said flatly. You're not being asked, Antonio replied. I'm merely suggesting to Domenico that such an arrangement would be beneficial. A Salvatore and a Rossetti, finally united. The marriage Marco should have made, completed by his daughter. Poetic, don't you think? No, I repeated louder. Absolutely not. Domenico's hand found my shoulder, squeezed hard. I'll consider your suggestion, Antonio. But Maya's future is not open for negotiation at this time. Of course. Take all the time you need. Antonio's smile was predatory. But consider it carefully. Such alliances have value, and in our world, value is everything. The meeting ended shortly after. Handshakes and false pleasantries exchanged, while I stood there numb, barely processing. Stefano Rossetti approached me as we prepared to leave, took my hand without asking, kissed it in a gesture that felt like ownership. We'll see each other again soon, he murmured. I look forward to getting to know you better. I yanked my hand back, fighting the urge to wipe it on my skirt. The elevator ride down was silent. Domenico's jaw was tight, his phone buzzing constantly with messages he ignored. The guards flanked us, professional and alert. It wasn't until we were in the SUV, doors locked and moving through traffic, that he finally spoke. That went better than expected. I stared at him in disbelief. Better? They want to marry me off like it's the Middle Ages. Antonio wanted to test boundaries, to see how much control I have over you, how invested I am in your protection. He loosened his tie, the first crack in his perfect composure I'd seen all day. By suggesting marriage to Stefano, he's actually acknowledging your legitimacy, acknowledging that you have value. I don't want to have value in your world. My voice broke. I want my mother back. I want my life back. I want to wake up and have this all be a nightmare. His hand cupped my face, forced me to look at him. Your old life is gone, Maya. Accept that. What matters now is the life you build going forward, under your control. Under my protection, he corrected. There's a difference. Is there? I pushed his hand away. You've made every decision for me since the moment I got in your car. You've trapped me, isolated me, used me as a bargaining chip in your political games. How is that different from imprisonment? He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying my face. Then, what would you do if I let you go right now? Dropped you at your apartment, gave you money, erased you from family records. Where would you go? I opened my mouth to answer, then closed it, because I didn't know. My apartment was a death trap now. My job at the diner was impossible to return to. My mother was dead, and I had no other family, no friends close enough to help. I had nothing, and no one, except the man sitting across from me, watching me realize exactly how trapped I really was. That's what I thought, he said softly. You have two choices, Maya. Accept my protection and the life that comes with it, or die trying to survive alone in a world that now knows you exist. Those are your options. Choose. The SUV slowed as we approached the estate gates. Through the window, I could see the high walls, the guards, the beautiful prison that was now my home. "I hate you," I whispered. "I know." He reached across the space between us, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear with surprising gentleness. "But you'll live. And eventually, you'll understand that I'm not your enemy. Then who is? Everyone else." The gates opened, and we drove through, and I felt them close behind us like a door slamming shut on my old life. That night, I stood at my window again, looking out at the grounds. But this time, something was different. This time, I wasn't just grieving what I'd lost, I was planning. If I couldn't escape this cage, then I'd learn to navigate it. I'd learn the rules, learn the players, learn how to survive in this world of power and violence and ancient grudges. My mother had run. She'd chosen invisibility and poverty over this life. But I wasn't my mother. And maybe Domenico was right. Maybe I was stronger than I knew. The next morning, I came down to breakfast in one of the elegant dresses from my closet. I'd styled my hair, put on makeup from the expensive cosmetics Maria had left in my bathroom. I looked like I belonged. Domenico looked up from his coffee, surprise flickering across his face. "I've been thinking about Antonio's suggestion," I said, sitting down across from him, with more confidence than I felt, about the marriage to Stefano. His eyes narrowed. And I think we should negotiate. Not agree, but negotiate. Use it as leverage for something I want. Interest sparked in his expression. "What do you want?" "Information. Access. I want to know everything about my father, about what really happened 40 years ago. I want to see family records, business documents, everything you're hiding. And I want a role, not as your prisoner or your bargaining chip, but as an actual member of this family." Domenico leaned back, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You're learning. You said I was strong. Let's find out if you're right." He stood, walked around the table, offered his hand. "Welcome to the family, cousin. Let's see what you're really made of." I took his hand, felt the weight of his ring against my palm, and knew I was making a deal with the devil, but maybe the devil was better than being devoured by wolves. Over the following weeks, everything changed. Domenico kept his word. He gave me access to family records, old photographs, documents that painted a picture of my father I'd never imagined. Marco Salvatore had been handsome, charismatic, beloved by his family before his betrayal. The photos showed a man full of life, laughing at family gatherings, young and hopeful. And there, in a photo from a university event, I found her, Caterina DeMarco, before she became Catherine Anderson. Beautiful and radiant, looking at the camera with joy in her eyes. Looking at Marco, who stood beside her, his hand on her waist. They'd been happy. They'd been in love, and they'd destroyed their lives for it. I learned the business too. Domenico brought me to meetings, taught me to read the subtle power plays, showed me how money flowed through legitimate and illegitimate channels in equal measure. I was smart. I'd always been smart, just never had the opportunity to prove it. Now I did. I also learned about Domenico himself, about the pressure he carried, the constant threats, the weight of an empire built on violence and maintained through carefully balanced power. He was ruthless, yes, but also strategic, protective of those he claimed as his own. And bound by codes of honor I was only beginning to understand, and I learned something else, something I hadn't expected. I was good at this. The negotiations, the strategy, reading people and situations. I had my mother's caution, my father's charisma apparently, and my own sharp mind that had been honed by years of survival. In Domenico's world, I found a purpose I'd never had serving coffee and scraping by. The attraction between us grew too, though neither of us acknowledged it openly. It was there in the lingering glances, the accidental touches, the late nights working together when the rest of the house slept.